We're going to have a conversation. I'm going to speak to someone who is the founder of this project called An American Union, which is the whole idea is they want to end war, end poverty, end prisons, some radical stuff, right? And they want to do so trying to organize a block of effective and organized swing voters. So they want to say, like, again, you got the Republicans, you got the Democrats. They're going to vote blue no matter who, red no matter who. That's what they're going to do. We need to get the people, right? The non-voters as well as, people that are in between. We need to get them all on the same page and then say, hey, if a Republican's going to give us these things, we'll vote for a Republican. If a Democrat's going to give us these things, we'll vote for a Democrat and then hold them hostage. I like that idea. It's a decent idea. So we're going to have a conversation about it. All right. So introduce yourself. Who are you? I don't know who you are, right? Like, no one knows who you are. They've never heard of you. So let us know.
Hey, good morning. My name is Brian Winters. I'm a former state representative from New Hampshire, and I'm a dad to a couple kids who shouldn't inherit so many problems in America. We've got a lot of issues facing our country, and most of them are because Congress won't do anything. So I came up with a different model of turning things around, of trying to weaponize swing voters, and a block of voters that would end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars. We wrote a piece of legislation that'll do that. It has universal basic income of $300 a week for adults, $100 a week for kids. It has a public option for health insurance. The framework is American Union jobs. Everyone gets an American Union job. Everyone gets $300 a week unconditionally. Option for health insurance, 18 weeks paid family leave, and a digital bank account. We end end mass incarceration with police and prison reforms. The federal war on drugs lets states set their own policies. And the endless wars by bringing our troops home and downsizing the military. There are a lot of passionate people behind all those different issues, and by coming together, the block of like 3 or 4 percent of swing voters in the middle, we can shift things to Republicans or Democrats, whoever will pass this legislation.
So yeah,
we can solve these problems.
The idea is basically to hold both candidates, whoever they would be, like ransom and say, we will decide this election, and if you don't agree with us, have fun losing, basically.
That's exactly right. They keep us divided into Republicans and Democrats and try and pit us against each other. We can do the same to them. We can pit them against each other, incumbents and challengers. So if incumbents want to stay in power, whether they're Republican or Democrat, then get this done. End poverty, end mass incarceration, end the endless wars. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself out, and the challenger can take your place if they'll take action for the American people.
All right. So how long have you been doing this project? Like, has it been for the last X amount of years, and you're finally at this point, or what?
Yeah, it's the last couple of years. I was looking at ways to address poverty because it's a huge issue in this country. That it's a shame that we allow 1 in 9 Americans to live in poverty. These are policy decisions that we've made as a country, and it's a big driver of a lot of other issues like crime, like healthcare. And so, how do we address poverty? Well, coming from New Hampshire, I was fortunate to meet a lot of presidential candidates going up there for the first in the nation primary. And Andrew Yang persuaded me that universal basic income was the easiest, simplest way to address poverty. And from there, that kind of all the rest of the pieces fell into place after that.
Okay, so would you say like this legislation that you've built is probably primarily over the last year or so?
Yeah, that's about right.
Okay. All right. I do agree that I think a universal basic income, just a straight up cash transfer, it's just the most effective way of dealing with poverty. They did these programs in Brazil, during the aughts and basically eliminated hunger, for example, which I think is pretty impressive. They've done these programs in European countries, right, where they just test out, okay, we're just going to give everyone a bunch of money, and typically it improves their health. They're allowed to buy more nutritious food, right? It improves their lessens their anxiety, because a lot of people, especially in America, we're working paycheck to paycheck, and a lot of us aren't working right now, right? So we don't know if we're going to live, in the same house next month. We don't know what we're going to eat next week. And that just kind of builds anxiety that really destroys your brain. Like it releases so many bad for you stress hormones that really just kind of is a slow killer. And then that drives up healthcare costs, of course, right? So, and that's like, at that point, it's a public health crisis, right? And it's all could be alleviated with basic cash transfers. So I do think that that is a very worthwhile plan. And I appreciate that the plan has more than just the cash transfers, right? It has, we got to deal with police. We got to deal with all these other really important issues. That way there's something in it for everybody, right? Because, some people aren't necessarily worried about their money, but they're worried about police raging through their neighborhood, that gets them involved, right?
You're absolutely right. Martin Luther King identified the triple evils of poverty, racism, and militarism because they're all interconnected. So if we want to end mass incarceration and get people out of jail, out of prison, well, what are they going to do? And so by having universal basic income in place, we make sure that there's already a support structure, a firm foundation for people to restore their lives. We want to downsize the military and all these people who make bombs for a living that we drop on other countries. And if we want to put them out of work, what are they going to do to feed their families? And so by having universal basic income in place at the same time, we can address all of these interconnected problems together.
Yeah, and it's the other, like, also with Medicare for all and stuff, right? People are tied and tethered to these jobs that they don't like just because they provide insurance. Like how many people, I know tons of people that are only working in a specific job and it's bad for them. Like, let's say it causes back problems and it's hard and, and the pay is not that good, but you got health insurance and you've got an 8-year-old with, chronic health issues. So it's not like you can go look for another job and have your 8-year-old without health care, right? So it's like these situations just keep people stuck in in the mud in a way. Like they're just they can't move, they're in quicksand and they're just falling through. And so I want to ask more about the strategy here, right? Like
Sure.
what is the idea?
Can I agree with you real quick on dealing with healthcare?
You're allowed to agree with me.
So by having a public option, it gives people the choice to keep their employer plan or to make a new government plan that competes with the private health insurance companies. Everybody's premiums keep going up. So by bringing more competition to that, we can bring prices down. And just as importantly, like you said, people can be free to change jobs without the risk of losing their health insurance.
Absolutely. Now, personally, I just want to say, I think I'm not entirely convinced the public option is the superior one, but I do think it's way better than the system we have now.
I want to just say that that's realistic for what we can do.
Yes, absolutely. Today. It's something we can do.
Exactly.
And then again, once you have that in place, you can build off of it. And that's the whole thing is we need we are so our country has not really had a fundamental change in almost 50, 60 years, right? And it's just been kind of degrading. So we do need a kickstart and then we can continue building off of that. But the strategy here, right? Do you want to try to get something in place by 2022 midterms? Do you want to do something for the next presidential campaign? Where are you trying to build the leverage to get to that point?
Oh, that's a great question. So I'm here in Georgia because Georgia is going to decide the balance of power for the U.S. Senate. And that's a big piece of leverage that we can have over Congress. So we just saw yesterday, right, that Congress has the ability to act. Congress has the ability to pass legislation, to put it before the House and the Senate and say, here, up or down, take it or leave it, and get things to the president's desk. So Congress has the ability to end poverty, to end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars. The legislation is written. It's only 159 pages. It's been mailed to Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi, and they could do this whenever they want. And so a block of 2% of Georgia voters who, when the pollsters call them up and say, hey, are you going to vote Republican or Democrat? Say, neither. I'm going to vote with the American Union. Whoever can get this through Congress can get my support. And when Mitch and Nancy look at the polls in Georgia and say, holy cow, we better do something or we're going to lose power, then they will act. So I'm here in Georgia. So I got another couple weeks to continue to build momentum here. And then from there, this is one legislative package for the 2022 midterms. It's one package for the entire country. Every candidate for Congress, every incumbent has a take it or leave it offer. End poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars.
I mean, it's like, how's Georgia been going? Like, because obviously this is it's a great package. I agree with it and stuff. But like, Georgia is an interesting case, right? You've got a lot of really young activists there that kind of propelled Joe Biden over the finish line, which is like why people are so optimistic for Democrats for taking the Senate, right? Like, have you been canvassing? Have you been calling people? Like, have you gotten a meeting with any of the Senate candidates yet? Or like, how's that going?
So I've been canvassing mostly and going around talking to people, and people are enthusiastic about this idea. A lot of people are frustrated with Congress and their lack of action and all sorts of things. So people are excited about the idea of actually seeing Congress do something for the people. I'm sorry, what was the other part of your question?
Like, yeah,
I have not met with the candidates. We reached out to Reverend Warnock because he seems like somebody who might potentially say, wow, this would be so good for the people that if Mitch McConnell and the Republicans actually passed this and this became law, I would be willing to sacrifice my campaign in order to see the quality of life for every single American improve. Basically, you understand that this model basically assumes that every single candidate for federal office is greedy for power and will compromise principle in order to get elected. And that assumption is generally true. I thought maybe Reverend Warnock might be an exception. We'll see if he gets back to us and says, this would be better than me winning.
Well, do you think, like, would you, if let's say Loeffler were to reach back to you and say, I will support this legislation, do you think it's likely that she's not, like, lying to you? Like, as far as, like, trusting them, No,
that's a great point. We don't trust politicians. So the expectation is that they act first before the election.
Right. Because they're sitting senators, so they can introduce this legislation, like, right now, and then that's where you take it on their word, right?
No, we can expect them to vote to actually pass legislation prior to the election.
Okay.
So in the national elections, 3 weeks before the elections, in the middle of October, politicians will be expected to make a decision and act. And if they refuse, then we can support their challengers. But no. So for so many years, we've been listening to politicians say, elect me and I'll go to Washington and I will do all these wonderful, amazing things. And then they don't do anything. So we turn the model around. We write the legislation first and say, here, take it or leave it, get this done, or get out of the way for someone else.
Yeah, like yeah, exactly. And now, personally, I don't have much faith in the Republican Party, and I don't have much faith in the Democratic Party either, for that matter. But as far as incumbents versus challengers go, if an incumbent doesn't do the job, I would, in a lot of ways, I would just take anybody else. Like, just because it's, one person has proven that they won't do anything. The other person has yet to prove that they won't do anything. So I'd rather take that. It's an unknown quantity. It doesn't always work out in our favor, as we saw at the 2016 election. But, it's at least a strategy. So, like, past the Georgia primary...
That's a very fair strategy. I don't have any great faith in the Republicans either. But the important thing is to come at this with a mind of what sort of deal would be acceptable to the American people, instead of saying, there's no way I could ever support Mitch McConnell, asking what is it that we would really like Mitch McConnell to do that would be so amazing, we would say, yes, you can run the Senate for another 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars. If he turns it down, I would love to see him out of the way and see the Democrats control the Senate. But we need to make a good faith offer in order to really try and move this country forward and past partisan politics.
Absolutely. I think that the partisanship right now, like just in the last year, right, has been absolutely nuts. Like with the whole, you have 70-something% of Republicans who think Donald Trump won the election, right? Because they just listen to everything that he says. It's absolutely bizarre, right? So anything that we can do to mobilize the percentage of this country that's not like, diehard blue guy or diehard red guy. That's super, like, it's a valuable thing. And that was kind of like one of the I guess the idea behind the Bernie Sanders campaign was to mobilize non-voters, mobilize people who aren't, addicted to the Joe Biden wing or addicted to the Trump wing, and get them and saying, like, we can give you an agenda. All you have to do is kind of show up. But we know that the primaries are kind of like not a very fair process. There's lots of, you have to register 8 months ahead of time, and you have to do this right. And then also, if you do it correctly, we're still going to just like purge you the week before the election, right? So like this is a much better, I think, suited strategy for a general election as well, just because I do think general elections are a little bit more fair than primary elections, right? But like, do you think, like, even in the next like cycle, 2022 or even 2024, like, do you think you can build enough people, get like organizations, email lists, like text lists, right, of enough people in enough states that like the actual candidates would listen? Like, how many people, like, do you need? You say you need 3 to 4%. How many is that in real numbers, I guess, is what I'm asking.
So I guess in real numbers, be 5 million people nationwide. So the answer to your question, though, is you get people to listen. And for that, this is where social media comes in. Social media is great at framing the question, like forcing the vote on Medicare for all, right? Whether or not that actually changes anything, it gets people talking about it. It gets people having to take a position. And so by having this out there, a very specific action, you can force candidates to answer that question. Do you want to keep poverty or do you want to end poverty? Do you want to keep mass incarceration or end mass incarceration? Do you want to keep the endless wars or end them? And by forcing candidates to take a position, even if they're not in support of it, that will frame the debate. And so when the voting population says, wow, we have a different option rather than just picking the red team or blue team, we can actually focus on what unites us as Americans. Letting people know that there's that other option will force a framework shift.
All right.
Yeah.
We have a question from the chat, if you don't mind answering.
I don't mind.
Will this be a populist movement, or do you plan to field your own candidates for American Union, potential third political party? I guess basically, like, are you, like, if both parties don't listen to you for 2 to 4 years, are you going to try to get your own person in there? What's the idea there?
That's a great question. No, this is positive populism. Right? Political cycles in this country, things go up and down. And so we're in the middle of a resurgence of populism, right? We've seen that with Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump to a certain extent. This is a positive populism that instead of being based on, one authoritarian leader who divides people, this is about enabling all of us to succeed, about us working together. And so the way to work together is not to put ourselves forward and say, we can lead you. It's about encouraging the best in others. And so, no, we'll not be running any candidates. The goal is to be a block of swing voters. Third parties don't work. I spent a number of years working with the Libertarian Party, trying to make them viable in New Hampshire. And it doesn't work, because to get elected as a third party, you need like 40% of the votes. And the duopoly has very carefully structured the rules to make that virtually impossible. 99% of the winners are always going to be Republicans or Democrats. So let's accept that reality and instead focus on what do we want them to do. Instead of focusing on how can we reform the electoral process, let's skip right to the results. What is the functional government that we want to see? End poverty, end mass incarceration, end the endless wars. Let's start with that.
I completely agree. One of my, just as a little side note, I think the third party thing is, I like it as an idea, but it really just, puts us back so many steps, right? Because instead of getting to the point where you have legislation on the table, you have to get on the ballot. You have to, get people to know that you even exist, which is, it's taken the Greens 20 years and they can only get like 0.1% of the vote, right? It's really just, I think, a dead end. And I also think that it also breeds corruption. During the Green Party primary process, it wasn't all that fair. There were a lot of like issues with certain candidates not appearing on certain ballots that were really mysterious to me. And it just seems that people are more interested in their position within the Green Party than they are about the power of the Green Party as a total. And I do think that you, as in the American Union or an American Union Project, right, you have the ability to like say, all right, it's not about us. It's about the package. It's about the policy. And it's so much not about us that we don't even have our own candidates. We don't have anyone. We are asking other people to support us. And I think that shows like that you are not corrupt in that sense, right? That you're not doing this as like a vanity project, that you're not doing this as like an ego move. And I think that that's very respectful personally. So
that's correct. But there is one thing that third parties are good about, and that's about sticking to their principles. Mm-hmm. Republicans and Democrats basically only stand for opposing what the other party stands for. But third parties, the Green parties and Libertarians, usually are driven by principle. And that's good. We need more of that. So like I said, I came to this as sort of from a libertarian background. And so that's one of the things I like about universal basic income is that it's unconditional. There's no bureaucracy, no red tape. It's just no restrictions on what you are and aren't allowed to do with the money. It's the freedom for people to make their own decisions, for everyone to do it. Same thing with the public option. I have no objection to Medicare for all and universal health care, but the public option gives people the freedom to make their own choices.
Absolutely. So you said you need to get about like 5 million voters nationwide to be on board with this idea. Like, do you think that that's achievable? Like in the next 2 to 4 years? What do you think about that?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is it doesn't need to be that many. It needs to be more concentrated in some key swing states.
Yes.
So in the 2020 election cycle, we were running ads and focusing on five swing states to try and create enough pressure in those states to get President Trump's attention. And if he had listened to us, he got mailed copies of this stuff as well. If he'd listened to us and he had ended poverty, ended mass incarceration, and ended the endless wars, he almost certainly would have been reelected as a problem solver, as the president who created 300 million American Union jobs.
I find it bizarre that he didn't even push for monthly stimulus package. Like that was like a layup for the reelection, and he just decided not to do it and made the whole election about statues and stuff. It was like, I don't know, it was really bizarre. But yeah, I mean, like, so do you think, what do you think as far as pressuring what looks to be a Biden administration, what looks to probably be a gridlocked Congress, because, like, it's unlikely that the Democrats will pick up the Senate, and even if they do, you got characters like Joe Manchin, who is basically a Republican, but he pretends to be a Democrat for whatever reason. And you have, like, even the Georgia candidate, like John Ossoff, he's not terribly, partisan. He seems to be, like, advertising himself as like, yeah, I'm a Democrat, but, and that's just kind of like the whole thing. So do you think even if theoretically, like, the Senate composition is 50-50 with Kamala Harris being the tie break, right? Do you think that there's much movement or leverage there? Or are you focusing more on like trying to make national attention and build for the next couple years?
Both of those things.
Okay.
Yes, we want national attention. We want as much public pressure as possible to implement these solutions. But there's room to work with people in Congress. These are problems that people agree on, that we should do something about poverty. We should do something about mass incarceration. And there's less agreement about downsizing the military, unfortunately, but that's still something that needs to be addressed. And so one of the ways that we try and bridge the gap between Republicans and Democrats is we have a compromise in this legislative proposal. As you probably know, two of the most polarizing issues in America are guns and abortions. And each party says that other party is going to take them away if you don't elect us. We're the only ones who can protect you. And the fact is, most Americans are reasonable, rational adults, and we can work out a reasonable compromise. So the legislation does two things. We codify the Hyde Amendment for 10 years and say no federal funds to be spent on abortions. And in exchange, we put a restriction in place so you can't propose any new bans on abortion for 10 years. On the other side, we include universal background checks, which is in this legislation, but also a 10-year ban on proposing any new restrictions on guns. So everybody who they want to try and make you afraid that they're going to take your guns away. Well, let's just take that off the table for 10 years and instead try and solve the real core issues. We should be concerned and upset that so many tens of thousands of Americans die from guns each year. But the majority of those are suicides. So how do we solve that problem that is driving so many of those gun deaths? How do we reduce deaths of despair? And ending poverty, giving people basic economic security will do an awful lot to address that core issue. Same thing with abortions. There's no reason that we can get that number of abortions down even further. And 2/3 of the women who seek abortions say that they can't afford the baby. Well, let's take that off the table. Let's make sure that everyone has that basic economic security, and the number of abortions will continue to fall.
That's a really good point. I just want to say, like the economic despair that leads to these situations, right? And I do think that when a Republican or sometimes just pro-life Democrats, right, what their goal is to stop abortions. Well, if you say we can't stop them all because it's just the way society is right now, but we can severely diminish the amount, with this legislation, I do think that has a decent chance of catching on. But
well, we're listening. We understand that those are real concerns. We want less gun deaths. We want less abortions.
Mm-hmm.
Great. We can all agree on those things. So what do we do to drive those numbers down? And like you said, it's not even realistic to talk about banning abortions because 40% of them are pharmaceutical. And if the war on drugs has taught us anything, it's that you can't stop people from getting pills and drugs that they want to. So you're never going to be able to drive abortions down through government force. You're never going to get them down to zero. But you can reduce the demand by solving the problems where people think that that's their best choice.
I absolutely agree with that. I also agree with the idea of the framing of the message, right? Instead of making this about banning abortion or, having, drive-through abortions like the Republicans think, right? It's about, fixing the problems that lead to people being in these situations. Like another big driving factor of like teen pregnancies, for example, is from a lack of sex education in a majority of southern states. They just say, if we don't teach kids about sex, they won't have sex. Well, I got news for you. They're going to do it anyway, right? So it's like, if you teach them about how to be safe when they go about these things and how to be, clean and, do these things in the ways that will limit the public health cost, you're going to have a better society, a more informed society, right? But I'm at the same time also not necessarily convinced that argument will work on some religious pro-lifers. I've met some interesting individuals, to say the least. But I do like where the mind's at of just redirecting the message to things we can all agree on and trying to divert the focus of these hot button culture issues to things that we should all agree on, right? Especially there's a poll done, 88% of Americans want more economic stimulus, right? So if your thing is like, we'll give you economic stimulus in the form of a universal basic income every week, right? 88% of Americans need that. They want that. And I do think framing the conversation in that way is going to be, I think it's a tremendous boon, especially now that people are going through this pandemic, this depression, right? People are realizing how unstable this country is, right? So, it's a great strategy, I think, in my opinion.
And so we also frame universal basic income as American union jobs. That we recognize that every American contributes to the value of this country. Your YouTube channel, for example, right? This is a more of a passion for you than the path to the lifestyle of being rich and famous.
Well, I mean, if I can do both,
Well, sure. But we do things that drive us that we're passionate about. even if they don't, if no one is generally paying us large amounts of money to do that. People who stay home with their kids and raise their families, that's valuable work, but we don't recognize it that way because they're not employed. So American union jobs recognize that everybody works, everybody contributes to this country, and so everybody gets $300 a week for adults, $100 a week for kids. And by recognizing that value in everyone, that's the positive populism, is giving everyone that solid economic base. And it addresses so many problems. Universal basic income gives people the freedom to walk away or to negotiate with low paying jobs. Right now, if you're being threatened, well, it's either take this or nothing, and you're being there's a certain element of coercion there.
Absolutely.
And by giving people the freedom to turn down economic coercion, we can make this a much better, freer country.
Absolutely, I agree. I've got another question about like you've been doing canvassing and all that stuff. What would you say are the, if people are against your proposals, what would you say are their concerns? Have you met that many people that just say no? And if so, did they just slam the door in your face instantly? Because that's usually my experience when canvassing. But sometimes you have conversations. What are their concerns? What is your even positive concerns too? What are people thinking about your proposals on the ground?
So people want to know how we're going to pay for universal basic income, and that's a very fair, reasonable question. And so the legislation does that in three ways. Very briefly, a value-added tax, a fee and dividend on pollutants, carbon and plastic, and then through new money. Right now, look, the economy needs additional dollars in circulation to thrive, but right now we're giving it all to the bankers, and instead, when Congress creates new money, everyone should get an equal share. That's how we pay for universal basic income. People sometimes ask questions about the ending mass incarceration. Ending the drug war is something that I grew up in the 80s in the Just Say No, Nancy Reagan era. The drug war has been around for a long time, but it doesn't work. It causes more problems than it hopes to correct. And so by getting the federal government out of that role, as saying national policy is let states decide. And that's what we've seen with marijuana legalization, right? Is states trying to make their own decisions, but still being hampered by federal restrictions.
Absolutely.
So ending the drug war is something that takes people a little bit to wrap their mind around it. But the idea that states will be able to decide is something that is hard to argue with. And then ending the endless wars. Some people are concerned about the military. Won't it put us at risk if we didn't spend as much on our military as the next 10 countries combined? And, the answer is there's always some risk. But look, we're a big, strong nation. We're geographically isolated, and we have hundreds and hundreds of military bases around the world. And we are making a lot of people in the Middle East upset with some of our foreign policies and our actions and our disrespect for the lives there.
Not to mention, homeless veterans and veterans with PTSD from the things that the, government forced them to do that they didn't know that they were going to do, right? It's not only a harm on our foreign relations, but it's a harm on our own citizens. And anyone who's had a military family member can tell you that.
It is. And what is one of the reasons that people join the military? It's for the economic security of getting a regular, if you're you live in the middle of the country and there's not a lot of economic opportunities, well, the military can be a good choice because you can get, health benefits, you can get, a job and training and things like that. So by instead giving everyone an American Union job and giving them their own economic security, no matter what part of the country they live in, we can make joining the military less desirable. And so allow our, downsize the military that way. As far as closing some of the foreign military bases, this legislation would require the Secretary of Defense to hold local referendums around every one of our foreign military bases and ask the people, do you want us here? And if the people say, no, we don't, then we're going to respect their decision and close those bases and leave. Um, that seems the place to start. That should be the low-hanging fruit. If the people don't want us there in those countries, then we should leave.
Absolutely. So I've got another concern from the chat room that I would like to echo. So as far as where the money comes from, do you what is the exact amount of wealth tax? Because especially over this pandemic, we've seen people like Elon Musk triple, quadruple even his net worth. We've seen Jeff Bezos nearly double his net worth. And these people aren't just going to, go away. The money that they're sapping out of our economy isn't just going to, it's, do you have any plan to reappropriate those assets or have a wealth tax or any sort of,
So
curb
let's say
accumulation?
So the short answer, I guess, would be no. We're not against prosperity. What we're against is poverty. And so we want to make sure that everybody's needs are being met. And if Jeff Bezos, whoever, wants to take that economic floor of $300 a week and build as high as they want, great, more power to them. The longer answer, though, is yes. Through the value-added tax, business profits tax, people who spend the most are going to pay the most. And so if somebody's out there buying, new jets and fancy cars and mansions and things like that, they will be paying into the system that funds universal basic income. And then if you're out there living a simple life then you're not going to pay very much into the system. So we do use that mechanism to address wealth inequality that way.
Okay.
And
all right. So I've got another question on that subject. So now a lot of people in my sphere of the world are not a fan of rich folks, right? And like I've said, we're at a point where about 40% of American renters cannot afford to pay their rent, and an eviction moratorium is expiring this month. So do you think that maybe a one-time wealth tax, or a net worth tax just because of, the last, say 20 years of capital accumulation, do you think that that's just untenable for a block of swing voters to agree on? Or what exactly? Because personally, I think if we did just reappropriate, let's say, a decent chunk of all the earnings that these rich people have made off of our backs during this pandemic, I do think that could be an easy revenue stream just for an immediate relief. You know what I mean? What do you think about that?
If you're asking me if I'm personally okay with that, then the answer is yes. As part of putting it into this legislative package, I guess I would need to see a specific. I want the way that we come up with this is by looking at different proposals and trying to dissect them, and it's easy to just throw ideas out, but until they're actually written down on paper, it's a little harder to say for certain.
No, absolutely. I'm just giving you ideas, because a lot of people go on.
But I would just say that in general, this legislation looks to equalize everybody, to treat everybody the same, and so a provision that's specifically targeted at just one segment of the population might not be in the spirit of this legislation.
I mean, I can see that there's ups and downs with that personally, but at the same time, I would say the people that you're appealing to are probably not going to be Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or Bill Gates, and therefore, if you frame it in a way, and this is just me pontificating, right? I'm not, but if you frame it in a way that it's these people stole your money, and we're going to try to get it back for you, I think that that's a potentially, actionable thing. And I'm just, giving you ideas here. You can mull it over.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm just what I do. Couple people in the chat are asking about more information for your thing. Would you like to provide any links? I have some in the description. But would you just like to reintroduce yourself to the people that have come here in the last 10 minutes or so, 20 minutes?
Yeah, thank you for putting the link in the description. That's a 4-page summary of the legislation, so you can see all the bits and pieces that are in it, all the police reforms, the prison reforms, ways that we downsize the military, the funding mechanisms for American Union jobs. So that's a pretty good description. The website, we've got two of them. One is for is anamericanunion.com, And that's the place that you can sign up for our newsletter and stay informed about what we've got going on and where we're organizing and who the candidates that we'll be supporting on January 5th will be. So you can sign up there.
Is that still in flux, or do you have the decision yet?
No. It is in flux. We're trying to negotiate in good faith.
Okay.
So Mitch McConnell had a deadline of December 14th to pass this through the Senate. He did not meet it. Nancy Pelosi has a deadline of December 24th. If she passes this through the House so that it's sitting before the Senate, then Democrats will get our support here in Georgia. But if she chooses not to do that, then it's still up for grabs. And so then we got 2 more bites of the apple coming up on January 3rd when the new Congress starts. So the old Congress has the ability to act before the new Congress starts, or the new Congress has the ability to act after they're sworn in. And if either chamber takes us up on this offer, great. That's what we want to see is delivering of solutions.
If neither chamber gives you like any acknowledgement or endorsements, are you planning on just supporting the challenger in that case, or what?
And it will be a sign that the 2-party system is really broken and not looking out for the people. And so on the night of January 4th, before the election, I will flip a coin. And we will ask people to support the Republicans or Democrats as a result of that coin flip. So many people have said there's really not much difference between the 2 major parties. And if they continue to ignore the fact that so many people in this country are hurting and doing nothing, almost virtually nothing, then we can withdraw our consent from the system, not by not voting, but by electing someone based on a random outcome. Saying, look, they try really hard to make us choose, to pick a side. We can refuse to do that.
Okay. I'm not necessarily sure I agree with a coin flip, but it's an interesting strategy, and I respect that. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, well, that's, if you have to pick a side, then you're agreeing to the system, right?
Yeah, I know. I definitely agree.
There's definitely some merit to that, but if you really want to end the system, then you've got to send them a clear message.
Well, and so I request, real quick, unlike the Iowa caucuses, can you please film these coin tosses so we know that they're real?
Yes. Yeah, it'll be live streamed on Monday, January 4th.
All right, there you go.
So make sure you're signed up for our newsletter at anamericanunion.com, and so you'll get the link to that. If it comes to that, we'd still much rather see Mitch and Nancy end poverty, end mass incarceration, end the endless wars. This is a good faith offer, and we'd very much like them to take us up on it. So, if you're more interested, though, in the nuts and bolts of writing legislation and all the policy details, we need help with that too. So you can sign up at phoenixcongress2020.com, and that's we're gonna need to generate some new legislation for the upcoming year, and as well as tweak this one, so we can always use more help with that.
Okay, awesome. Do you have anything else you want to talk about today?
Sure. There's so many reasonable, rational people in this country, and somehow we've bought into this story that Congress can't do anything. But it's not true. We just saw this yesterday, right? That they were able to pass this 5,593 page legislation in a matter of hours. Congress has the ability to act. And so we need to remind them of that. Say, look, you could do this. And if you don't, it's because you're making a choice. And so hold them accountable for that. I mentioned earlier that these were Martin Luther King's triple evils of poverty, racism, and militarism. Mm-hmm. And so since we have the ability to fix them, we have a moral duty to do so. We have a moral duty to act. And one of the ways that we show this is there's a group fast on the 15th of each month, a fast for peace. And by voluntarily abstaining from food for 24 hours, we demonstrate that we're not advocating for UBI out of greed, trying to end mass incarceration and the drug war because, we just want to live in our parents' basements and smoke pot. We're doing this because there's a problem.
I feel called out.
Well, So here's a way that you can demonstrate that. You can voluntarily give up food for 24 hours. Just drink water.
I do that regularly anyway. It's pretty easy.
It is pretty easy, but it takes an intention.
Exactly.
Exactly. And so by all of us working together and generating this intention, this is what Gandhian scholar Gene Sharp called a fast of moral pressure. And so this is a fast of moral pressure on Congress. They have the ability to act. They have the ability to end poverty and mass incarceration and end the endless wars. We just need to pressure them to do that. And, you know, as you probably know, a lot of people in this country are really getting frustrated with the process. And some people are starting to snap. And there could be people who want to violently force Congress to do things or violently try and change the system. This is a non-violent revolution. This is by using the fast of moral pressure, by offering specific solutions that will improve the quality of life for every single American, by giving people a way to opt in, fixing America and building it up better. We can change the system peacefully, non-violently, cooperatively, in a way that enables every American to succeed. That's what I want for my kids. Yeah.
I like that. Now, I have another question as far as potential tactics. Would you, you know, at some point, maybe after we're all vaccinated, would you be in favor of a modern March on Washington? That one, like, you know, a situation where we get millions of people like on the steps of Congress telling them like these are our demands. Would you be interested in such a thing?
Absolutely. And, you know, that's one of the great things about universal basic income is that it unlocks all this activism, right? With $300 a week, you can literally occupy Washington. You can make that self-sustaining.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is why I am personally in favor of a UBI. I want some money to play around with, right? But yeah, right. I mean, I think that this is a good idea. I think that if you can organize, like even if it takes 5 years, you know, to get this pressure, right? You know, it's a well-worthy plan of action. It doesn't take that much to kind of just sign up and keep involved with it. You know, even if people who are watching me or watching the archive of this later, right? Even if they don't want to, you know, be on your newsletter and get updates, everything, you know, bookmark the page, check back and, you know, January 4th, see what they're doing. Because in my opinion, you know, there's a lot of these organizations and projects out there that have, you know, different ways of trying to accomplish similar goals. And I think it's a good idea to just kind of keep everyone on tab, right? You know, just see what everyone's up to, you know, and kind of keep that coordination going on, because we're stronger when we're more coordinated, even if we have different, you know, projects that we're working on, as long as we know what each other is up to, you know. For example, if I'm doing some sort of Medicare for All outreach, right? I'll know that you're doing this outreach that's very similar, and then we can signal boost each other, and like that's how we help each other grow, right? So absolutely in favor of your plan.
Absolutely. And that's one of the other purposes of the monthly fast as well, is that so everybody can work on their own projects, their own issues all month long, but one day a month, we all say, yep, we're all on the same page. We all want to build a better America. We all want to solve these problems. And sort of like you say, signal boost each other. And yeah, that's the goal.
I have one question left.
Yeah, go for it.
Can we smoke weed on the fast?
As long as you're not eating anything and only drinking water.
Okay. All right. There you go, everybody. There you go. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you today. Good. I hope I answered your questions, and if not, shoot me an email. I'm Brian at phoenixcongress2020.com, and yeah, we can solve these problems. There's no reason why America should be facing all these issues. We just need a mechanism to force Congress to act, and by weaponizing swing voters, we can make it happen.
All right. There you go. All right. So thank you for coming on. If you